Hello, hello, and welcome to our audience. Slightly thinning, but that's good because that means you get a lovely, intimate chat in what promises to be a fabulous panel here, talking a very, very important subject matter, may I add, and I've been building up to this. I've had 5 panels this week, and this has honestly been one that is very dear to my heart, and it's Nourish the World Sustainably. So, a few facts for you to start off with. Undernutrition is associated with 45% of all child deaths. Over 811 million people worldwide are hungry, which is shocking, and 47 million in 81 countries live on the verge of famine. So we've got lots of questions to get through with my esteemed guests. So I will introduce you to, in no order, Patricia Bubner, CEO and co-founder of Orbillion Bio. We have Ghias, President and CEO of Engro Corp. Philippe Rombaut, owner and CEO of Agropolychim. I said that correctly? Perfectly. It's going good. And last but not least, on the end, we have David Rosenberg, co-founder and CEO of Aerofarms. So I would like to start with you, Ghias, and I want to know, let me get you the mic, is sustainability compatible with global food security, or should one be prioritized over the other? You're coming from it from a very different part of the world, Pakistan-based, so let me know your thoughts, please.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here at this event. Thank you very much for inviting me to and obviously to the Future Investment Initiative as well. Fantastic event. So let's first of all start with an expectation on what the population of the world will be in 2050, and we're looking at a number of around 10 odd billion, right? There are two things, there are two certainties when we look at that future. Number one, there's a lot of food that will be required in this world. And secondly, the challenge to the planet in terms of climate change, the planet is going to be a lot more vulnerable over the next few decades. And if we were to just look at the potential demand for some of the staple crops, right? So demand for wheat is expected to grow by about 200 odd million tons per annum. And just by way of comparison, that's about twice the wheat that is produced by China. You know, sugarcane, again, is going to be around 500 million tons per annum, more than what is produced right now. And that's nearly as much as what Brazil produces, being the largest producer. Rice, again, is going to be around 400 million tons per annum more, and that's, again, twice what China produces. And again, maize, an equal amount produced by USA right now will be required. So if one was to just stick to the traditional methods of agriculture, then you're going to probably require around 600 million hectares of land more, which is equal to the arable land of USA, China, India, and Russia put together. So that's the size of challenge that we are looking at if we were to follow the traditional methods of growing food. So that obviously leads us to a very clear conclusion that unless and until we modernize the way we do our agriculture in a very, very sustainable way, we're not going to achieve our goals. So clearly, it's not a choice. Food security is only possible if done sustainably.
I'd like to bring Philippe in at this point because I know you're very passionate about this. And in terms of accessibility, you know, in this day and age, the fact that people still don't have access to food.
Yeah, I mean, sustainability, it's all about humanity here and sustainability, and a lot of discussions were about CO2 emissions. Sure. And yes, there is a whole list of things that the new agriculture should do, and actually McKinsey came out with a nice report of 25 points. Slow release fertilizers, precision agriculture, taking care of the manure, etc. I mean, all these things can be done. The question is, when they will be done and how do we get there? The other thing, though, is that we need to ask some fundamental questions to certain countries who are doing certain things which, according to me, even if they do all this agriculture as they should, according to the textbook, there's something fundamentally wrong. We have a problem of having enough food. But in the meantime, for instance, the United States could be a nice balancer, as the kingdom here is a nice balancer of oil.
Sure.
The United States can do the same, because 40% of the corn is transferred in bioethanol. Corn, which is food or feed. It doesn't make any sense, or it doesn't really make any sense, at least in the next 5-6 years, for surely not. There are new technologies for making bioethanol, second generation, by using straw and so on and so on. So I think that as the United States is producing about 350 million tons, and 40% is transformed, well, there you already have a reserve of 120 million tons. Then you have also more, and I'm very glad to begin on a very nice, diverse panel, because we're actually talking about all different angles.
Sure.
I'm also talking more about staple food and staple production. We have seen in the country where I'm working, in Bulgaria, Romania, and so on, we've been capable of increasing food productivity by 50% in less than 10 years' time. That's a hell of a lot, because, for instance, Bulgaria has 3.5 million hectares, and if you increase by 2 tons per hectare, that's 7 million tons. And hence, Bulgaria became exporter of 5 million tons. Romania the same. Ukraine, unfortunately, has a problem, but has a huge potential if and when the war stops.
You've just brought me on to the next point I was going to make to you. Obviously, we're very aware what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. What trends, and I guess, in fact, what impact has that had on reserves and distribution?
The worst is yet to come. We have a food crisis now, by which the wheat prices have increased from $200 to $350 in less than 8 months. It's going to increase more. Have no illusions. The harvest which is coming out now, as far as possible, out of Ukraine, was planted when there was no war. Now, there's at least 30-40% less planted, and whoever is planting doesn't have fertilizers as it should, doesn't have the fuel, and so on and so on. So it's going to get worse. And if you allow me, just to, because I'm with my nose actually on the war. I'm living in Bulgaria on the Black Sea, which is 1.5 day by boat to Odessa, which is impossible now. What we need to avoid, what the politicians should avoid, is the next big discussion. And the elephant in the room is China going to attack Taiwan? I mean, you can imagine if that happens, forget about anything we discussed here for the last 3 days. We can throw it out. And I think that as much as food has been used as a weapon in the war for the last 8 months, food should be used as a weapon for not having the war. And I explain myself. And maybe as a joke, I was telling to my friends, we should make OEC. We have the OPEC here, making stability on the oil. Let's make the OEC, Organization of Wheat Exporting Countries, by which we put together America, Canada, Europe, Australia, maybe Brazil, and tell very clearly a scenario to the Chinese. If you ever want to go to Taiwan, there will be no more food for you. I hope it's never going to get there, but at least the scenario will be set, and I hope everybody's going to stay honest and not do the stupid things that we have seen between Ukraine and Russia. I leave it up to there.
No, fascinating. I mean, Patricia, this is something equally you're very vocal about in terms of accessibility and how we readdress the shift, which I imagine is going to be very gradual.
Exactly. Everything you said is something that we know is a huge problem. You said second-generation biofuels. They don't really work that well, but they came out of the necessity that we use corn for bioethanol, and there was always this food versus fuel problem. Then rising food prices, it's not only the grains, and what you said, we use corn for bioethanol, but we also use corn and soy and other grains to feed animals, to feed livestock, to make, in a very inefficient way, meat. So at Orbillion, my company, we make meat without the animal, and with a very efficient way, feeding very basic and easy ingredients that are efficiently converted to protein without any waste. And the question is, how can we employ these new technologies to really feed the world, nourish the world sustainably, which is our motto today? We can make these technologies accessible for everyone because you do not need land to grow, to raise animals, to raise livestock. You need energy, you need water, but again, 72% less water and 92% less land than when you grow livestock by using new technologies. There are technologies like we use them to make cell-cultured meat, so meat made from animal cells in a bioreactor. There are other methods to generate alternative proteins using fungi, using other organisms, and that's all very exciting.
I'm going to give you this opportunity to just explain in a little bit more detail for those who don't know what cultured meat is. If you can go into the science in layman's terms for us, please.
I'll do the best, and you just stop me if I'm getting too nerdy here. But you know, everybody's talking about protein and plant-based protein these days. And protein is really just one molecule that's made up of amino acids. What we make is cell-cultured meat, meaning we take the entire cell, and the cell makes proteins, makes DNA, contains all the vitamins and the fat and everything. So what we do is making real meat. Take the cells from an animal, instead of having the cow or the lamb grow, we grow only the parts that we really eat and need.
Where is its place in the world?
I would say everywhere. I mean, I'm really excited, and I have to thank FII also to invite me here today to speak, because here in the kingdom, of course, there is an opportunity to really also grow meat and be an exporter of beef, for example. Just imagine. So as long as you have, you know, the land to, or the ability to build bioreactors, and you have the people there that can run these bioreactors, you can make food, you can make meat.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, what's your take on which agricultural technologies will most significantly impact the future of food?
Well, first I'll share, so there's a lot of problems, and the problems are multidimensional, and they're even more than what we discussed today. And then there are enablers, technology enablers, that are bringing wonderful opportunities. And whether it's cloud computing, AI, there's synthetic biology, there's sequencing the genome, the automation, robotics, these can enable multiple technologies to solve a problem that needs to be solved holistically. And I'll give 3 quick examples. So one, Aerofarms, we grow vertical farms, and the enabler there is LEDs, which is a microchip. And all of a sudden, as the cost, the CapEx, the OpEx of a microchip comes down, and the cost of an LED or luminaire gets lower, then we could grow lots of plants in very efficient ways all over the world. And whether maybe we start off with salads, but then it goes to berries and other crops. And this is going to change how we feed humanity, both locally for fresh food, but also how we interact with field farmers, whether we grow starter plants that get transplanted different ways. Another example, a company, Every, I'm honored to chair the board there, and here we use synthetic biology. Basically, we grow proteins, egg replacements, so chemically the same as an egg white, but not through a chicken, through precision fermentation. So in big chemical vats to produce these proteins that literally both a soluble egg, soluble protein in solution, or as an egg, changing the world. Another one, Aspire, we grow, just like vertical farms with plants, we grow crickets. Crickets is one of the most efficient sources of proteins. 1.3 units in produces 1 unit of protein out. I don't know another way to more efficiently produce a protein. Humans have a trouble getting through the ick factor, but we're selling it as proteins for dog food. And imagine something the size of this room, all growing level upon level of crickets. In 30 days, they increase their biomass 600 times. That's the equivalent of going from like a baby to a T-Rex in 30 days. So here are like 3 examples, there are many more, of how does technology, all these wonderful enablers, change the way we source food, change the way we grow plants, or whatever it is. It's an exciting time, and there's amazing technology that will continue to push science and push solutions in the years to come.
Those solutions are all incredible, and as you say, there are many more. I just want to turn our attention to Aerofarms and geographically how they're doing in different regions, especially when you look at Europe. You know, electricity prices through the roof. We're seeing companies going bust. How are you guys coping?
I'll share something cool. So in the last week, a week ago, we announced with Whole Foods in the US that we're going nationwide out of a facility in Virginia. And what's important about that is before this, we were positioned as local food. So we had a big facility in New Jersey, and it was sold locally, and it was positioned as local. And now, if we're going nationwide out of Virginia, nationwide in the US, it's not about local, it's about better. And to me, this is analogous to an important moment in the alternative meat program. There's a company, Impossible Burger. Impossible Burger was sold in Burger King, and it was positioned as animal-less free meat. And then it went to the Whopper, which is the flagship burger for Burger King, and it wasn't positioned as animal-less meat, it was positioned as better. It's not just better, a better Whopper. And in a similar way, Whole Foods is looking at Aerofarms as not a local, it's just a better way to source kale, arugula, or watercress. And now we're looking in the region here, if one of our cost of goods sold is energy, if we grow a plant using 5% of the water, then we could grow it in deserts where there's maybe abundant energy, not much arable land, not much fresh water, and really look whether it's the Arctic or the equator, all over the world to enable it. And here, technology again, in robotics and the processing, we could grow it bigger, and now if it's about better, not about local, you could have better economies of scale, build them bigger, and ship it in farther places.
We talk about the benefits of new technology and advancements, but Philippe, I mean, there are also problems, I guess, in terms of getting farmers to embrace new technology. I imagine it's quite risky for some people.
Oh, yes. Actually, the new trend, and my farm, I have a farm myself, so we're going to that, we're very convinced about that, is regenerative agriculture. Farmers should do that. Actually, there is this way of working is very simply explained. Always keep your fields covered. Mm-hmm. So when you take a harvest, don't leave your fields empty, because if it's empty, the sun is beating up, it dries up your soil, there's no biomass coming in. Second, you actually plant in the permanent cover crop, and you do no plowing. There's another third one where say, to the extent possible, let the animals roam around. In my case, I have taken the decision that I don't invest in anything that eats except my children, so I don't do animals. I've been there and it doesn't really work very well where we are. But the real problem is that farmers, especially in Europe, are really in a difficult position. Last year was more or less okay because they were still using cheap fertilizers, and all of a sudden the wheat price went up, so they got a bigger margin. But even before that, to give you some figures, if a farmer in the region where I am invests 750 euros in a hectare, he hopes to get 200 euros as margin. Right now, because the fertilizer price went up so high, not only fertilizer, and the fuel and the pesticides and everything else, they need to put 1,500 euros per hectare, and they still hope to get 200 euros. And so the risk is getting very big, because if it doesn't rain, you stand to lose your farm.
Yeah.
And interesting, I mean, not interesting a lot. Sadly enough, I mean, people are saying, oh, we need to go to organic farming, and actually in the farm to fork policy of the European Union, it said that 25% have to go organic. Well, guess what? Suicide rates in France is double in agriculture sphere than in any other sphere. And 75% of the suicides are in organic farming. Because it's very hard. The cost for an organic farmer is going up just on documentation. Documentation by at least 20 to 25%.
So the organic food is good for us, but
it's
not
good,
for the
it's
planet.
good for us who can pay for it, but for the farmer it's a difficulty, and you will never be able. Actually, organic farming is against sustainability, because you will need at least 2 or 3 times more land, and we don't have it.
Yeah. Ghias, for you, I mean, you're coming at this from a very different region, but when you look at agriculture as an occupation, what do you think is in it for the workers? Do we need to support them a lot more?
Yeah, so, I mean, particularly in Pakistan, right, where the agriculture sector not only accounts for 20% of the GDP, but it actually employs 40% of the population. And I'm talking about a country of 220 million people. So this becomes a very, I would say, a complicated subject that with technology coming in, which is absolutely the need of the hour, this is the only way to sustain the number of people that will be in this world, and even the growing population of Pakistan itself. Even though in our country there is a lot more room for improvement in every aspect of the value chain, whether it's about seed quality or the usage of different fertilizers and the equipment that is used, and then farm to logistics and everything. So there's financial inclusion. There's just so much room for improvement in every aspect. Now, if you do bring in technology and it does lead to a reduction in the workforce, that is a complicated subject. And then I guess that's the only way to deal with it, is that there's a lot of collaboration required. There's a lot of we've been talking about democratization of technology, especially in the last couple of days. There's a lot of that will be needed, a lot of collaboration. There's going to be a need for government intervention in training people and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is in a country where 40% of the population is involved in agriculture, changing techniques that will fundamentally change the way they are gainfully employed is not an easy subject to talk about.
I can see Patricia nodding along, and someone needs to give her a microphone because I think you've got something to add to this.
Thank you, Jane, but I'm very passionate about that, and so good to be on a panel with people that are deep into both the workforce development and understand farmers, because for a lot of time, we're using technology to make meat, and people see that as, you want to put farmers out of business. I'm like, no, we're just one part of the food system that's necessary, but we actually want to be able to give farmers the respect that they deserve for the work that they've been doing all along. First of all, we build on what farmers have done and have built for centuries. We're taking cells from animals that they have bred, right? We're taking the best cells. We're working with farmers. And then I believe that regenerative agriculture is a fantastic concept, and I've visited a regenerative farm in California where I live, and he told me, all the things he's doing, and he has more water retention. I'm like, what do your neighboring farmers think of you? And he's like, well, they think I'm crazy. Like, so how long will it take you to convince your neighbors that this is the right way? We don't have the time. We don't have the time to convince everyone. We need to have several solutions to make sure we get the nutrition for people and just the food for people going. We need to develop technology. We need to have more regenerative farming. We need to make sure that farmers get the margins and the support that they need, because right now they are working for us so that we have the food that we need, and they're not getting paid for the work they're doing. We need to make sure that the workforce is developed and has meaningful jobs. And that's also something where, if you think of what we're doing, cultured meat, we will actually create jobs. So there have been studies that 94% of the jobs in meat production are actually in the downstream part, in the product manufacturing, in distributing products, and so on and so forth. Farming is only 6% of these jobs. So there's really not much of that transition needed. And the way I see it is, we can make cell-cultured meat that will be commodity beef, that will be ground beef, for example, ground lamb, and so on. But the beautiful steaks and these really good pieces, they will still be done by farmers. Farmers will sell them and hopefully get the margins that they deserve. They will have less livestock. There will be the prices, as we heard from Philippe, will go through the roof, not only for wheat, but also for meat. We will not be able, a lot of people will not be able to afford meat anymore unless we do something about it. So that's where I see this world is going, and I'm, as you can see, very passionate about that.
There's obviously a lot of questions, a lot of work to be done, but when it comes to responsibility, who do we tag that to?
All of us. Responsibility is on all of us. I think everyone who knows what needs to be done needs to step up and do it. That's why we're also here, right? I'm a scientist by trade. I'm here to tell people cell-cultured meat is not something that's far off in the future. We are doing it. We ate it. It's around the corner. What we need is the capital. We need the support from the governments to have regulatory approval to bring this product to the market.
David, how can investors ethically help secure the global food supply?
So let me just first go back to your last question about who's responsible.
Yeah.
So there has to be public-private partnerships. And the public here can play a big role, especially in externalities that don't come into the calculus of commerce. So whether it's CO2, whether it's pollution, all these factors, and government should be performance-based, not prescriptive, meaning they shouldn't say whether it's cell-based meat or synthetic biology or animal, that's not their role, but what has an impact and how do you improve performance standards? And then let the entrepreneurs, let the innovators improve standards or improve performance levels. So that's one, and it has to be integrated. And CO2, all these things, there are ways to do it, and we need strong leadership to do so. In terms of the investment side, one of the reasons I'm here in Riyadh and proud to be part of FII is, as an entrepreneur, we want to go to places and interact with people that are that embrace innovation, that are early adopters. So you look at the adoption curves, and there are early adopters, then there's mainstream, and then there are laggards. You don't want to be with the laggards because then it's hard to get things off the floor. You want to be with the early adopters. And what I love about this region, about places like Riyadh, is people are willing, they have a bold vision, MBS has a bold vision, leadership has a bold vision. They're putting high targets, high performance in, and they're inviting entrepreneurs to come ahead and be part of that. And they're investing in early technology. So they're the early adopters, and that's where we want to go. And there are a few places in the world that really embrace that. In the Middle East, you just look at the wonderful architecture, the buildings being built, and it's, I think, somewhat symbolic of bold vision and capital to go ahead and be the early adopters. You look for either where there's political will, where there's pain. And here, like in vertical farming, there's pain. You're not going to grow plants other ways. There's political will, there's environmental will, there's capital. And this is one area where you could go to really launch new technologies and scale from there.
Ghias, what's your thoughts on the investors ethically helping secure this?
So I think investors are going to play a very, very critical role here, right? So, and you've got the examples of the EV industry in front of you, right? So a few years ago, I mean, if I go back to, let's say, 2019, 2020, there's, billions of dollars, about $20-odd billion got invested in the EV sector. And, with US coming out with programs as well, federal programs of investing, over $40-odd billion in this industry. And as a result of that, you can see how that industry has progressed. Now, 1 out of every 5 cars sold in Europe is an electric vehicle. The technology itself, the range of the cars is increased 12% per annum over the last few years. And now, look at the number of cars being sold, 2.2 million about 2-3 years ago to 6.6 million registrations that took place last year. So there you have an example of how capital came and sort of helped in, transforming a particular sector. And you would expect something similar in this industry as well, where investment has to be done keeping in mind certain KPIs, nutritional value, right? Is the food providing the requisite nutrition or not? Impact on environment, particularly with regards to CO2 emission, and just overall responsibility to people and animals. And once these benchmarks are there, and you've got many case studies of where capital has helped and catalyzed disruption.
On the end.
So 2 points. One is, back to the performance side. So and this is where sometimes regulators mess things up. So if you take water, if you have an artificially low price for water, the entrepreneur, the innovator isn't going to solve that problem. You have a market rate that includes pollution, that includes waste. All of a sudden, we're going to have better performance standards for water. So like with Aerofarms, if we could grow a plant using 5% of the water, there's no economic value. Maybe I put in more expensive filtration, maybe I put in more expensive dehumidification, and maybe it has good societal benefit, but it doesn't work its way into commerce, so it doesn't really get into the economics. And to your point, also look at solar. So solar, you had the early adopters in Germany, in the US, all of a sudden then you had big manufacturing in China, and then the cost of solar goes down, then you have solutions for sub-Saharan Africa. We don't have to solve all the world's problems one day. Like with Aerofarms, we started off with leafy greens because our cost of goods sold was high, but it works in the market prices that work today for field farmers. Now we're getting into berries, strawberries, other crops. So we need those early adopters. And it's not necessarily intuitive, but the early adopters make way for mainstream. So how do we go in and branch out from there, from a capital standpoint as well as a solution standpoint?
You say that, and we're coming up with these solutions. And as you say, we're not going to solve all the world's problems in one day. But can these solutions almost keep up with the rapid speed of climate change? You know, are we able to do that?
To answer that, because I think what you said is very important also for what we are doing.
Sure.
There is, you know, often we have this high aspiration where we say we need to solve everything at once, but it's really the gradual steps. And somebody also said that in terms of energy, right? When we go from fossil fuels to renewable energy, it's not a total switch one day or the other. It's a mix of things, and it's a gradual thing where we add the leafy greens, and we know how to produce them sustainably, the berries and so on. Same thing with meat and with cell-cultured meat. We replace ground beef first, and then many, many more products as the technology advances, as we can scale, as we can bring the cost down. And often we get asked, oh, but you know, making cell-cultured meat is really expensive. It's like, yeah, because we don't have the scale right now. But that's where we started, to your point, with electric vehicles and battery technology. And look where we are now with battery technology. And finally, the governments are stepping up and are putting money in. We need that for biomanufacturing as well. And we see it slowly trickling in, but to your point, Jane, this needs to be faster. We can't only rely on early adopters. We need this to be adopted rapidly now. We need to leverage the technology that we have. We cannot wait.
Is there a... Oh, sorry, Philippe.
We're in the food and the feed sector, which is by definition heavily regulated. So even if the technology is there, before you can put it out to the market, it's going to take you 4 or 5 years of scrutiny. In America, it's the FDA. In the European Union, it's another institution. The largest...
Tell me about it.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm supporting you on that one. The largest emitter of CO2 as a methane, because methane is 80 times CO2 equivalent, is actually the emissions of the ruminants, basically the cows and the sheep. There are about 10 or 11, what I have seen, and I know, additives to feed that you can give to the cows so that they have less methane emissions.
You're dealing with this very politely, I must add.
Yeah, I'm on camera. I mean. But in order to be able to give it, there's 4 or 5 years of studies and testing, and how the hell do you test this? You know, and this is the largest part. This is 1/3 of the emissions of agriculture comes from the methane emissions of ruminants.
Cows alone are 8% actually.
Yeah, 8% of the total, which is 20.
Same as concrete.
Exactly. So they say agriculture is 27% of all the emissions of CO2. And it's 8% is that. But it takes you 4 or 5 years. After you have found something, it takes you 4 or 5 years just to get the FDA and all the regulations. So yes, we want to go fast, but let the regulator also go faster. But we're dealing with food and feed, and so we have to be careful.
I have to say something to that. You know, the regulators are working on this, and the regulators are, it's important. Yes, we would like to go faster, but at the same time, we want to make sure that for us, the product that we're making is safe as well, right? And also, in order for them to go faster, they need to have more resources. Are we putting the resources down? Because they're working really, really hard on approving these new things, approving these products. There needs to be policy in place, there needs to be money in place, there needs to be a support and the pull in place. And we see the pull now, but is there a push from the higher levels to do that? So just adding on to that.
What then takes priority? Do we look at the sustainability angle, or do we look at the needs of the population in terms of nutrition and, you know, calories that they need? Where do you sit with that?
It's not black and white. I don't think you can say one has priority over the other. We need to find ways to address both. And again, it's like, it's all a piece of many, many parts that need to work together and many players that need to work together, and it's not the same for different parts of the world. And I think that is something that I'm missing in a lot of the discussions that I'm involved in, especially in the US and Europe, and I'm sure, guys, you have to say something to that we do not understand the needs. Yeah. In the US and Europe, we have land, we get imported soy from Brazil, they are burning down the rainforest for that, that's all great, we ignore it. but we don't really know a lot about the needs and the demands in the rest of the world. And if you look here, and you can say people here understand with the Vision 2030 now that we need to change something right now. That's where we need to listen more to the voices from other parts of the world.
Ghias, your observations.
Yeah, so let me give another analogy here. As a lot of you may know, Pakistan was hit by massive floods. It led to displacement of over 30 million people.
Yeah.
And let that sink in, ladies and gentlemen, 30 million people. We contribute 0.47% to the carbon emissions of the world. We're literally paying the price for what the developed world has done. So when you ask the question about food security versus sustainability, and on the one hand, if we see 30 million people displaced, it's not an easy answer. You've got to feed people. And this is where I think the world needs to come together. It's very, very important for countries who have developed over the last 100 years. They need to take responsibility and work with the less developed countries. I think that's the answer. We need to work together.
David, you've got a point to add.
Yeah, so what we want is transparency in our supply chains. And we want people to make educated decisions, educated purchasing decisions. And we want to influence the supply chain to perform at certain levels, certain standards. And the retailers here that are at the edges of the supply chain have tremendous influence. So as an example, at Aerofarms, we sell to Walmart, we sell to Whole Foods, and we work with them to work and understand, like, how do we grow, how much energy, water, all these different features we use, and then ultimately there's transparency, and people could influence buying decisions, and some people break rules, and then it's how do we, and what we don't want is people to be at a competitive disadvantage for being a good actor. As an example, if minimum wage, let's say we pay $15 an hour in the US, and then someone else is hiring people and paying under that, then they have a competitive advantage for breaking the rules. And I'm not saying what minimum wage should be, I'm not saying that people shouldn't do that or do that, but how do we create transparency in the supply chain? And the retailers, and some retailers, like hats off to the Walmarts as well as the Whole Foods of the world that are driving behavior within that supply chain, have tremendous influence to create that transparency and get the supply chain to act at certain performance levels.
David, anything to add? You're holding, not David, sorry, Philippe.
Sustainability. It's the same discussions as we have had on energy.
Sure.
We want to get green energy, but in the meantime, we need to get the power. We want to have sustainable food, but in the meantime, we need to feed ourselves and especially feed the world. And so I think anybody who can do something about it should do it. To go back to real farming, is that 75% of the farms in the world work about 35% of the land and is less than 2 hectares. Leave these guys alone, for God's sake, man. They're trying to make a living. I mean, but be a little bit harsher on the big farms. They will show the example. For instance, regenerative agriculture. It's the same in Europe also. It's very difficult in Europe to push through that one because machinery has to be changed. The margin is very low. Will it work? Will it not work? But big farmers have the possibility to risk part of the farm, show that actually it makes sense and it makes money. Why? Because if you're the owner of your land or you know you're going to be working there for a long time, you need to take care of your soil. And that's a real problem in Europe, everywhere else in the world. Regenerative farming takes care of your soil gets better, you have better water containment and so on. And then the smaller one next doors will see that actually it's getting better. A farmer by definition is very conservative. And he's going to move, and he's going to change by jealousy. He say, oh, my neighbor is doing better, and how does he do that? And that's how it's going to work. But in the meantime, you know, we need to do, everybody who can do something, and every single bit helps, we have to do that. But not impose on everybody the same.
is it fair to say that the new agricultural revolution has begun, or is it coming still?
It's not a revolution because regenerative agriculture has been around for 20, 30 years in America. And actually the ones in Brazil and so on, they have leapfrogged because, see, one of the other things is that regenerative agriculture, you have to go less in the fields and you need less people. And so in Europe and in parts of America, we have to get rid of the old engine and then start with the new engine. But let's not forget, and that's a very important point what you made, I've seen in Bulgaria where we have really leapfrogged and we have fantastic tractors and we're very efficient. But we have killed in less than 20 years 600,000 jobs. Huh? 600,000 in Bulgaria alone. And of course, luckily we joined the European Union and they all left to Spain and Italy and Germany and so on. But, you need to have the possibility to keep the people and give them jobs.
Yeah.
Of course, you cannot keep the same way and do the things inefficiently. It's all going to be step by step, step by step. I don't think that's going to happen by 2030, but it's a vision. It's a way of canalizing the brains and the minds and the money to get somewhere. Otherwise, you never get anywhere.
I kind of see you as a agricultural futurist slightly. Very quickly, what are your hopes for the next 5 years for the industry? We can start with you, Ghias. You can answer that.
Sorry, if you could just repeat your question.
What are your hopes for the industry for the next immediate 5 years?
So I mean, clearly looking at the great work that is being done by Patricia and David, what I can hope for is that more capital will flow into the ideas that are generated by these wonderful entrepreneurs.
Sure.
But I do want the innovators to be mindful of the fact that our population is going to increase to 10 billion. And for countries like developing countries like Pakistan, where the large part of the population is involved in traditional agriculture, and people need to think about how they will get trained, how will they be gainfully employed, and so on and so forth. Those social aspects have to be kept in mind as well. But I think the next 5 years are looking very bright. I think capital will flow in this direction. I think governments will get their act together, and perhaps your dealings with the FDA are going to become easier.
David, Patricia, Ghias, and Philippe, thank you so much for being a wonderful panel. We're out of time. Thank you guys for being our audience. We filled up, see? I knew we had a good discussion on our hands. So thank you once again for being part of this today.
Thank you.